Madison Square Garden, November 28th, 1974. 20,000 people screaming. And then, silence. A figure emerged from the shadows of the stage, thin, wire-rimmed glasses, a face the world hadn't seen perform in years. John Lennon walked toward the microphone, and for a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Nobody in that arena knew they were watching history. Nobody knew this would be the last time John Lennon would ever stand on a concert stage. Not even Lennon himself, but Elton John knew something was different that night. He could feel it in his bones, in the electricity crackling through the air, in the way his hands trembled slightly above the piano keys. This wasn't just another Thanksgiving concert. This was something else entirely, and it had all started with a bet. 6 months earlier, Elton John was sitting in a recording studio in New York, listening to a song that wasn't his. The track was raw, unfinished, but there was something undeniably infectious about it. A driving beat, a simple hook. The kind of song that gets stuck in your head and refuses to leave. "What do you think?" John Lennon asked, leaning against the mixing console with that familiar half-smile. Elton didn't hesitate. "It's a hit, a #1 hit." Lennon laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed off the studio walls. "Nothing I do goes to #1 anymore, not since the Beatles." It was true, and they both knew it. Since the band's breakup in 1970, Lennon had released critically acclaimed albums, politically charged anthems, deeply personal confessions set to music. But the charts had been cruel. Imagine had peaked at #3. Everything else had struggled to crack the top 10. The magic, it seemed, had faded, but Elton heard something different in this track. Whatever Gets You Through the Night had a groove, an energy, a commercial appeal that Lennon's recent work had been missing. It sounded like a hit. It felt like a hit. "Play piano on it," Lennon said suddenly, "and sing harmony, if you're so confident." Elton agreed without thinking. He sat down at the studio piano, cracked his knuckles, and within hours they had laid down a track that neither of them could stop listening to. That's when Elton made the bet. "If this goes to #1, he said, pointing at Lennon, "you have to perform it live, with me, on stage." Lennon's smile faded. His eyes, always intense, grew serious. "I don't do that anymore. You know that." "I know, but if it hits #1, you have to. Deal?" A long pause. The tape machine hummed in the silence. Then Lennon extended his hand. "Deal." To understand why this bet mattered, you have to understand what John Lennon had become by 1974. He was a ghost. Not literally, of course. He was alive, living in New York with Yoko Ono, making music, making headlines, making enemies in the Nixon administration. But the John Lennon who had commanded stages with the Beatles, the one who had played Shea Stadium to 55,000 screaming fans, who had performed on rooftops and in television studios, who had owned every room he ever walked into, that John Lennon had disappeared. His last real concert had been in 1972, a charity show at Madison Square Garden, coincidentally enough. But even that had been chaotic, rushed, imperfect. And since then, nothing. No tours, no shows, no live performances of any kind. Some said it was Yoko's influence. Some said it was paranoia. The FBI had been monitoring him after all, trying to get him deported. Some said he had simply lost his nerve. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Lennon was exhausted, burned out. The pressure of being a Beatle, of being John Lennon, had crushed something inside him. Every time he thought about stepping onto a stage, he felt his chest tighten, his breath shorten, his hands shake. Stage fright. The man who had conquered the world was terrified of performing. So when he shook Elton's hand that day in the studio, part of him believed it was a safe bet. #1? Him? Not a chance. But Elton John knew better. Whatever Gets You Through the Night was released in September 1974. Elton watched the charts like a hawk. Week after week, the song climbed. Top 40, top 20, top 10. And then, in early November, it happened. #1. John Lennon's first solo #1 single. His first since Instant Karma 4 years earlier, and that had only reached #3 in America. This was different. This was the top. The very top. When Elton called to tell him, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You're joking." "I'm not. Check the charts yourself." #1, John. You owe me." Another silence. Then, I don't know if I can do it. A bet's a bet. Elton, Thanksgiving, Madison Square Garden. I'm already booked. You're coming. The fear in Lennon's voice was palpable, even through the telephone. I haven't performed in 2 years. I don't know if I remember how. Then remember, because you're going on that stage with me, John. You promised. The weeks leading up to the concert were torture for both of them. Elton was in the middle of his most successful period. 1974 had been a banner year. Caribou had gone to #1. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was still selling millions, and he was the biggest rock star on the planet. His Thanksgiving shows at Madison Square Garden were sold out, legendary, the hottest ticket in New York. But all he could think about was John. They rehearsed in secret, late nights in empty studios, just the two of them and a piano. Lennon was rusty, nervous, constantly second-guessing himself. His voice cracked on the high notes. His timing was off. His confidence, once so unshakable, had eroded into something fragile and uncertain. Maybe this was a mistake, Lennon said one night, sitting on an amplifier with his head in his hands. Maybe I should just pay you off. $1,000, 10,000, whatever you want. Elton sat down beside him. I don't want your money, John. Then what do you want? I want you back. The world wants you back. You can't hide forever. Lennon looked up, and for a moment, Elton saw something he had never seen in his friend's eyes before. Fear. Pure, undiluted fear. What if I've lost it? Lennon whispered. What if I get out there and I've got nothing left? Elton put a hand on his shoulder. Then we'll find it together. 3 songs. That's all. You can do 3 songs. A long pause. Then Lennon nodded slowly, reluctantly. 3 songs. November 28th, 1974. Thanksgiving night. Madison Square Garden was electric. The crowd, 20,000 strong, had been building energy all night, screaming through Elton's opening set, singing along to every word. He had given them Rocket Man. He had given them Benny and the Jets. He had given them Your Song. But he hadn't given them what they really wanted. Not yet. Because backstage, hidden from the audience, John Lennon was falling apart. He was pacing, back and forth, wearing a path in the concrete floor. His face was pale, his hands were shaking. He had changed his outfit 3 times, unable to decide what to wear, as if the clothes could somehow protect him from what was about to happen. I can't do this, he said, for perhaps the 100th time that night. I can't. Yoko was there, holding his hand, whispering reassurances. But nothing helped. The fear had taken over. Elton burst through the backstage door, still sweating from his last number. 5 minutes. You ready? Lennon looked at him with wild eyes. No. Good. Neither am I. Let's go. Elton, John, listen to me. Elton grabbed both of his shoulders, forcing eye contact. Out there are 20,000 people who love you, who have always loved you. You were the voice of a generation. You changed the world, and now you're going to walk out there and remind them why. What if I fail? Then you fail, but at least you tried. That's more than most people can say. A stagehand appeared at the door. 2 minutes, Mr. John. Lennon closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, something had shifted. The fear was still there, but so was something else, something harder, something older. Let's do it, he said. The moment would become legendary. Elton returned to the stage, sat down at his piano, and spoke into the microphone. I'd like to bring on a friend of mine who's been working on this song with me. Please welcome John Lennon. 20,000 people screamed. The sound was overwhelming, a wall of noise that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. And through that wall walked John Lennon, thin and pale and terrified, wearing a black shirt and his trademark glasses, looking like a man walking to his own execution. But then something miraculous happened. The moment his hands touched the guitar, the moment he heard that first chord ring out through the arena, the fear melted away. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched. And when he opened his mouth to sing, the voice that came out was the voice the world had been missing for years. John Lennon was back. They performed Whatever Gets You Through the Night first, the song that had started it all. Then Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Elton's recent cover of the Beatles' classic. And finally, as an encore, I Saw Her Standing There, a song Lennon introduced as one by an old estranged fiancé of mine called Paul. The crowd went insane. Backstage afterward, Lennon was shaking, but this time with adrenaline, with joy, with something that looked almost like relief. "That was incredible," he kept saying. "That was absolutely incredible." Elton hugged him tight. "Told you so. Maybe I should do this more often. Maybe you should." But he never did. The night at Madison Square Garden was John Lennon's last public concert performance. He didn't know it at the time. None of them did. But looking back, there was something almost prophetic about that evening. A final gift to the fans who had loved him. A last glimpse of the genius before he disappeared forever. After the show, Lennon returned to his quiet life. He and Yoko had a son, Sean, born exactly 1 year later on Lennon's 35th birthday. John stepped away from music entirely, spending 5 years as a house husband, changing diapers, baking bread, watching his boy grow. He called it his retirement. He said he was happy, and maybe he was, but he never performed live again, not once. The Madison Square Garden show became the stuff of legend. Bootleg recordings circulated among fans. Grainy footage surfaced years later. Stories were told and retold until they took on an almost mythical quality. The night John Lennon came back. The night Elton John brought him home. And then 6 years later, everything changed. December 8th, 1980. Monday night. Elton John was asleep in his London home when the phone rang. It was late, past midnight, and for a moment he considered ignoring it. But something made him reach for the receiver. The voice on the other end was hysterical, barely coherent. Words tumbled out in fragments. Shot. John. Hospital. Dead. Dead. Elton sat up in bed, his heart pounding. "What are you talking about? Who's dead?" "John. John Lennon. Someone shot him outside his apartment. He's dead, Elton. John is dead." The world stopped. Elton would later describe that moment as feeling like someone had reached into his chest and ripped out his heart. The room spun. The phone slipped from his fingers. And then for what felt like hours, he simply sat there in the darkness, trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. John Lennon was 40 years old. He had just released a new album, Double Fantasy, his first in 5 years. He was finally ready to come back. He was finally ready to perform again. And now he was gone, shot 5 times by a man whose name Elton refuses to speak to this day. Murdered on the sidewalk outside the Dakota, the apartment building where he lived with Yoko and Sean. Dead before the ambulance even reached the hospital. The world mourned. Vigils were held in Central Park. Radio stations played nothing but Beatles songs. Grown men wept openly in the streets. But for Elton John, the grief was personal, intimate, devastating. He had lost his friend, his collaborator, the man who had stood beside him on that stage in 1974, shaking with fear and then found the courage to sing anyway. The man who had trusted him enough to make a bet he never expected to lose. Gone. Forever. 2 years later, Elton released a song. It was called Empty Garden, Hey Hey Johnny, and it was about John Lennon. Bernie Taupin wrote the lyrics, a simple, heartbreaking tribute to a friend who would never grow old. And when Elton sang it, you could hear the grief in every note. The first time he performed it live at Madison Square Garden, the same arena where he and John had shared that magical night 8 years earlier, Elton broke down completely. He played the opening chords, tried to sing the first verse, and found that he couldn't. The tears came, hot and unstoppable, streaming down his face while 20,000 people watched in silence. He finished the song. Barely, but he finished it. Yoko Ono was in the audience that night with Sean, who was only 6 years old. After the show, she came backstage and embraced Elton without saying a word. They stood there for a long time, 2 people bound together by their love for a man who was no longer there. Looking back now, more than 50 years later, the Madison Square Garden performance takes on an even deeper significance. It was John Lennon's last act of public courage, his last performance before a live audience, his last chance to remind the world what he was capable of, and to remind himself. Standing on that stage, terrified but determined, he proved that the fear doesn't have to win, that even when you're convinced you have nothing left, there might still be one more song inside you. Elton John knew that when he made the bet. He knew his friend needed a push, needed someone to believe in him, needed a reason to step back into the light. And so he gave him one. Whatever gets you through the night was never just a song. It was a lifeline, a dare, a promise between two men who understood each other in ways that most people never could. And on that cold November night in 1974, with 20,000 people screaming and the spotlight burning down, John Lennon grabbed that lifeline and held on. It wasn't enough to save him. Nothing could have been enough to save him from what was coming. But for one night, one perfect, terrifying, triumphant night, he was alive. Fully, completely, magnificently alive. And that, perhaps, is all any of us can ask for. 3 songs, 1 stage, 2 friends, a moment frozen in time. The last time the world saw John Lennon perform, he was standing next to Elton John, singing his heart out, finally unafraid. 6 years later, he was gone. But the music remains. The memory remains. And somewhere in the echoes of that November night, John Lennon is still singing. The year was 1974. The place was Madison Square Garden. And for 20,000 people and one terrified former Beatle, everything changed. This was the night John Lennon came back. It was also his goodbye.